And away we go with the college football recap. My name is Jeff Cameron. Thanks so much for tuning in. As always, it's great to be with you on Sunday morning after another wild weekend of college football. We begin. How much do we love this sport? A lot, right? That's why we're all here together talking about it. Before we get started and looking at that top 25, I'll let you know Austin Price of VolQuest is going to join us later in the show. Anthony Broome from the Wolverine and Bobby Burton of Inside Texas, our guest today. As you know, if you're new to the college football wrap show, then every week at this time, 11 a.m., we get together yet again to celebrate our favorite sport, and we look around the country, pick 3 games, 3 sites that On3 has, obviously giving you the best in the business, the best work on the ground covering those teams, and we get their insights after important games. Now, we choose those games before the games are played, so sometimes, obviously, things work out or they don't for that respective guest, but those guys jump on board and tell us what it all means to their team, their program, and the season at hand. Now, that's every Sunday, 11 a.m. Like and subscribe. Hit that bell so that way you know it's happening. It's a beautiful thing. Good day to you guys. Hope you were loving the college football yesterday. It's a weekend where a lot happened, but nothing of note at the very top because Georgia walked through a win, obviously, against Kent State, 39-22. Bama, easy over Vandy, 55-3. Ohio State houses Wisconsin, a team that doesn't look very good when they face teams with speed. But then it gets fun. I imagine voters are going to have a hard time figuring out the difference between, say, Michigan and Clemson and Southern Cal, all of whom survive scares but get wins. Kansas State knocks off Oklahoma. Think about that for a second. You want to have fun with college football. We see strange results every week. We know the transitive property doesn't always work from Saturday to Saturday, this team and that team. Well, how about Kansas State? Adrian Martinez goes from losing to Tulane last weekend to beating the Sooners in Norman. Huge win for that program, but it's not a shocking one. They've done it recently 2 of the last 3 times. Of course, Tennessee gets a huge win. You see the scores right there. Texas A&M survives a missed field goal late. That's a good win for a program that's had to pick itself up off the map. I mentioned Southern Cal, 17-14. They win. Texas Tech defeats Texas. That's a bad loss for Texas. We just saw Texas Tech look poor on offense against NC State, but they get the win there. Again, we'll be joined by Bobby Burton to talk about that game. Baylor knocks off Iowa State. Oklahoma's loss, aforementioned. The Clemson-Wake game, 2 overtimes, a lot of fun to watch. Both offenses on display. Tennessee, again, remains unbeaten at home. They've got it rolling right now on offense. Going to have to fix that defense. Kansas defeats Duke. They're undefeated. Are they the best team in the Big 12? Big 12 is a weird conference. And again, Michigan survives that scare. A lot of fun throughout the college football world yesterday. I don't know if you got to see the end of the Oregon-Washington State game, another classic as Oregon found a way to come back late and get the win there. If you just saw the score, you may not know that they were down considerably late in that football game and turned it around pretty quickly. The performance of the day, without question, Hendon Hooker in my book. All-time great performance in that rivalry as he was 22 of 28 for 349 yards and 2 touchdowns, 112 yards on the ground as well, 13 carries and a touchdown. They needed all of it because Anthony Richardson found his game again, showed back up for Florida as he had a great day, but it wasn't enough. Tennessee holds on late to get that win, but when you complete 79% of your passes and do the things that Hendon Hooker did, it's reason to celebrate. Austin Price will be joining us here in just a minute. We'll get him in and get his thoughts on Tennessee. Fun to watch culture shifts in various programs, right? When you look around, a lot of programs, big name programs, have new coaches. And when they do, you wonder how quickly things can get turned around. You look at USC, for example. We're only in year 2 with Sark at Texas. Again, you think about Mike Norvell at Florida State. That team is undefeated right now, 4-0. They'll be ranked this week. You think about Miami with Mario Cristobal. Everybody was so excited to get him into the fold, and yet now we sit wondering exactly what's happening there as their defense doesn't show up at all against Middle Tennessee. Michigan State, a team that a year ago, everybody excited about what they were looking like and what that was going to become. Now, all of a sudden, you see this as a team that gets blown out at home by Minnesota. So you do have to wonder exactly who is what right now. But this is why we love the sport. We think we know Georgia's really, really good. And certainly Alabama is immensely talented. despite that struggle a couple weeks back against Texas. But I think it gets interesting from there. We really start wondering. I mean, USC this weekend, only the 17 points, makes you think long and hard about what they are. That is a veteran Oregon State team, a big offensive line, a physical team. You go all the way back and you think about what is Billy Napier with Florida. They got the huge win, obviously, against Utah to start the year. Then they had a couple of hiccups along the way, a close call against USF, who got blown out this weekend by Louisville. So you think you know what Florida is. Maybe not very good. Maybe it's a major rebuild instead of a minor rebuild. But I thought offensively he looked the part, obviously, again, of what they thought he'd be before the start of the season. So now what is Florida? It's tough to know. All of these things are exciting around college football because it gives you the great mystery from Saturday to Saturday, where we think we know, but we really don't know. We know this: every year at the start of a college football season, there are 4 or 5 teams you are certain are going to be good, and 4 or 5 teams that you think will probably have tough years. Invariably, 2 or 3 of those teams end up being the opposite of one another, right? The teams you thought might struggle. I'll give you an example. Syracuse is undefeated, 4-0 right now. They get the win over Virginia. Syracuse is a team that nobody thought about coming into this season, yet there they sit undefeated on the cusp of being ranked as well. And then you think about some of the other teams that you thought would be elite or take a big step forward. We've already mentioned them. That hasn't happened to this point. So it'll be fascinating as we go forward. We'll try to get Austin Price in here in just a moment. Not sure we're going to get him. We'll see. If not, we can skip ahead, guys, if you want, to Anthony Broome from the Wolverine. If we can grab those guys, we shall. If not, it'll be a really short show as I recap the top 25. And I can go back through some of these. Some of the games that I was paying closest attention to was the Michigan game over Maryland. It was a sloppy game, but one that I think if you survive, you look back on later in the year. And the star of that game was Blake Corum. Big runs in the biggest moments of that contest, including a big 4th down scamper on his way to 243 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. J.J. McCarthy is often the story with Michigan right now because of that upside, but he is also a guy that, frankly, at times was sporadic. So interesting to note as of there. I see him now. Here he is. We've got Austin. It's going to be good. Let's talk about the big win that Tennessee gets over the University of Florida. Austin, how are you, sir? Thanks for joining us this morning.
How's it going? How are you?
I couldn't be better, man. I know things are hopping at VolQuest right now. And reminder to everybody, if you haven't signed up for the great work that they do there at VolQuest, do it now. You're never going to be able to sign on for cheaper than you are right now as we get rolling with On3. Austin, they've got it going on offense. There's no doubt. This is an all-time performance from Hendon Hooker. Talk about the buzz after this game, because this is the stuff of legend. 22 of 28, 349 yards, 2 touchdowns, 112 yards on the ground. Every time a play needed to be made, he made it.
He made it. You're exactly right. Tennessee used him as their de facto running game in this game. Now, granted, Tennessee went for over 200 yards on the ground. Jabari Small got 90. Performance in this football game, he was really, really good from the get-go. He had kind of started slow those first 3 weeks and, kind of found his footing in this game, Jeff, and got off to a hot start. Last year, hot starts were what he was kind of known for. Kind of reverted back to that in this game. As you said, just the second Tennessee player of all time to go over 300 passing and over 100 yards rushing in the same game, joining Josh Dobbs, who was there on the field watching Hendon Hooker do his thing yesterday because the Cleveland Browns had played on Thursday night. So you had a lot of former Vols on the sidelines, a big recruiting weekend. Tennessee capitalized on a massive, massive atmosphere, and now they'll head into the bye week at a good time. They're a little bit banged up. Hendon's a little bit banged up. Got a little bit of a shoulder injury on the left non-throwing shoulder, but he'll be fine. He didn't have any ice on that thing at the end of the game, but this is a huge, huge win for Tennessee.
Austin, Tennessee averaged 8.2 yards per play in this game, and that is absolutely massive. They needed all of it, though. If we do look at the other side of the ball, are there growing concerns about this secondary?
Well, I think there have to be, right, Jeff? I mean, like they give a lot of pad yesterday. I kept joking in the press box. I'm like, it was 3rd and 11. They're going to get to the 49. Okay, then they'll set down at the 50 and they'll pick it up, right? I mean, it was just like, and then of course, when it actually happened, everybody would just laugh. And, it became this routine, deal in the football game. Now, the secondary had not played that bad up till yesterday. Tennessee's, rush defense has been really good all year. Rodney Gardner's taken a kind of an underwhelming unit as far as big names and gotten a lot of really good play out of them, which is no shock knowing Coach Gardner's track record. But the secondary had not been what it was yesterday all year. But yesterday it was really, really bad. I think clearly they were, trying to make sure Florida didn't run on them. But at some point there had to be an adjustment, and they did not adjust at all. They allowed Florida to just pick them apart. And again, Anthony Richardson had himself a career day. He threw for more yards yesterday than he had thrown for the first 3 games combined. And, part of that's the fact that Tennessee just allowed him to have massive windows to throw into. I could have completed those passes, and I'm no quarterback. So, it was one of those, perfect storms for Tennessee secondary. Had a weak moment. They need to get some guys healthy. They've got to continue to work depth and see what happens. But there's no doubt about Tennessee's 3 big defensive back commits in this 23 class sitting there in the stands yesterday can see there's immediate playing time available here.
It's interesting you mentioned the bye week, and I was just about to ask you, and I'm glad you brought up the health aspect of this. What can be done for Tennessee secondary? Because obviously at this rate, with the start that Tennessee has, you have an elite quarterback right now making big plays in the biggest moments. You allow yourself as a fan at this point to dream, right? Any team, any program that is flipping culture and starting to win some football games, and you infuse life into that group, they want to believe that, hey, man, all of a sudden we've got 2 major wins. If you think about the East, Tennessee is right there. Obviously, it'll be a big hump to try to hurdle over Georgia. But the bottom line is all of a sudden Tennessee's a team that would probably have their eyes on an SEC championship appearance. That's how fans think when you start like this and you have the offense to fall back on what can be done defensively to kind of shore things up and give them a shot.
Well, I think that you have to continue to get pressure on the quarterback. I think, a young player like Josh Josephs has got to get more playing time. Yesterday, he almost got home twice on Anthony Richardson. And if Anthony didn't have such a strong lower body and could get passes off, you're probably looking at 2 sacks. There were multiple times Tennessee got home yesterday, and Richardson is just so tough to get down that he gets some passes away that end up being incomplete passes or just throwaways. But they save Florida, 6 or 7 yards off a sack. There's a hidden yardage in a football game, and that's one of them for Florida, as long as he's the quarterback, just because he has that trait and that ability. So I think you want to continue to get pressure, which means I think you got to see more Josh Josephs. Let's see if James Pierce can work his way into being more of a factor, long term, and then just continue to mix and match, the secondary. Kamal hadn't had a terrible game yesterday. He was not good in coverage. He was not good at tackling. But, to this point, he's been Tennessee's best defensive back, and he had not played that way. So I think if you look up and Jaden, Daniels at LSU is doing the same thing that Anthony Richardson did in 2 weeks, then that's the biggest problem. I think right now you chalk it off as a one-off and work towards, trying to see if you can get, better depth, more playmakers in the secondary going forward. But again, I think this bye week comes at a perfect time for Tennessee. They get a chance to kind of, rest, reset, get on the road recruiting, get people healthy, and get ready for a big game at LSU. You go back to 2016, Jeff. Tennessee beat Florida. They beat Georgia. When you beat those 2 teams, you're almost a lock to go to Atlanta, right? Well, they didn't that year because they lost some games late. But after that Florida and Georgia win, the next week they went to A&M. That was a top 10 A&M team. Then they hosted Alabama. This year they play LSU and Alabama back-to-back, but there's a bye week in between, which I think is big because it allows Tennessee to scheme things up and get ready for LSU. An LSU team that is good, not great. An LSU team that, you talk about fans wanting to believe. You win that game and you beat Florida and LSU and Pittsburgh, and then Tennessee fans let themselves start dreaming a little bit because Alabama will come in that following week. And if LSU or if Tennessee is beating LSU, they're likely a fringe top 5 team at that point. And of course, Alabama is top 5.
Out of curiosity, because it is one of the great settings in college football, Neyland Stadium, Give me a sense of what that atmosphere was yesterday. It looked incredible on television. Obviously, everybody saw how pumped these fans are. You talk about a recruiting weekend. You talk about getting over on a rival. You talk about taking yet another step forward, kind of exercising the demons, if you will. The game gets crazy late. What was that atmosphere like?
It was unbelievable. I talked to multiple recruits this morning, including On3 5-star David Hobbs. Blown away by it. So much so that, he decided to go ahead and book his return trip for the Alabama game coming up October 15th, which will be an unofficial visit. This was a big weekend for the recruits, for Tennessee in recruiting. Everybody really, really feeling, that atmosphere yesterday. It was electric from the jump. The Vol Walk was massive. The buzz on campus all week really was something special. But I thought kneeling was really special yesterday. The checker kneeling, I know Tennessee's now 2-4 in those games. Most of that's because Tennessee's been so bad, and every time they check kneeling is for a big game. Nobody's checkering kneeling for Akron, right? So you're checkering it for Alabama, Georgia, Florida. Well, Tennessee hadn't won those games in the last 15 years. So Their record in those games is naturally going to be bad. But, Tennessee got the win yesterday. It's just a neat atmosphere. And, when Tennessee's on, Neyland is rocking. And when Neyland's rocking, the atmosphere is right up there with the best in college football.
Yeah, it's good for the sport. It's good to see. It's always fun when the better programs, the upper echelon programs, the programs of note, of merit in college football history are at their best. If you can get everybody doing it simultaneously, it's really fun. So we're seeing some teams now that have been down, making their way back up. You mentioned Tennessee. I've mentioned Florida State, a couple others. It's fun to watch the rise and see these teams fill up yet again. Hey, Austin, great work as always. Thanks for the time this morning, and enjoy that bye week, buddy. I know everybody can exhale.
Buddy, I'm going to enjoy it. I'm taking my kids out to California. We're going to go to Disneyland and go watch Nico Iamaleava play on Friday night. So we are excited to get out and go have a good time.
Now, that's how you utilize a bye week, sir. That's how you do it right there. Well done, and thanks for the time. I'll talk to you again later this year. Tennessee's going to be back on here again. We know it. I'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Appreciate it, Jeff.
All right, take care. That is Austin Price of VolQuest. If you have not joined On3's VolQuest, you should. He does great work. His staff does great work. We've been fortunate enough over time to be able to work with them and have those guys on and talk about what's happening with Tennessee. So as it is with the case with all of these shows that we'll be doing throughout the year, we bring in guys that run these sites for On3 and have been doing great work in the world of college football for a very long time, specific to those areas. And that's how we get them on to talk about the program at hand. And it changes each week. So your program will likely be on here at some time, obviously, certainly as we kind of preview each week with the top 25 games and go from there. We're efforting to bring on Anthony Broome right now from the Wolverine, if we can. We'll see. Hopefully we will. And also Bobby Burton from Inside Texas. I'm fine with either right now. Both played big games, different results. Obviously, we talked about the top 25, and one of the things to note, Michigan was a team that up until that point, same with Maryland at that point, hadn't really played anybody. So there were a lot of question marks about just how good is that offense? How good will Michigan be? Can they sustain the success they've had as of late? We didn't know. That game was an interesting game to watch play. In fact, I bring it up. It was 34-27 Michigan. And it was kind of a sloppy game. There's no other real way to describe this. But I mentioned that Blake Corum was the star of this game, and they were looking for a guy that they could fall back into and believe in the run game. He was certainly that. And then you see with J.J. McCarthy, there's an unevenness to his play, but there's also an upside. And when you watch some of the spectacular throws he makes and some of the bigger plays that he makes, you realize why they want to play him. But boy, there are times where he'll make you hold your breath, holds on to the football, efforts to make a big play frequently. Sometimes that young man's going to have to learn to throw the ball away. Really quick, circling back before as we try to get in Anthony Broome, I do want to mention, when we were talking about Austin just a moment ago with VolQuest, we were talking about Hendon Hooker. That's a young man that is a great testament to what hard work is, right? When you watch a guy, we remember how raw he was the first time you ever saw him at Virginia Tech, and you remember what kind of player he was, and then you see what he's become now as a passer. You always knew he could run, but a lot of the guys that are really athletic and can really run the football at quarterback, we see it with quarterbacks all over the country, especially in the college game, the next step has to be taken if they're going to be a championship contender. They've got to be able to move forward in the passing game. And I think if you look around college football right now, you're seeing that at several places. And it's good to see when you read about, like you did on VolQuest, the amount of time that he's put in, the way he's beloved by his teammates, what ends up happening with guys that put in the time and work real hard to develop aspects of their game. It can be done. I know sometimes we as fans watch quarterbacks early in their career and think, this ain't it. This isn't going to be the guy. But then you watch them struggle, fight back, move forward, and have a kind of game like he had yesterday. That's as good as it comes. I mean, he'll be remembered in Tennessee for a very long time for that game. Again, those numbers, 22 of 28, 349 yards, 2 touchdowns, another 112 yards rushing on the ground. They needed all of them. That was on 13 carries, also a touchdown on the ground. He's completing over 70% of his passes right now. At Tennessee, as I said, averaged 8.2 yards per play. So bravo to that young man. Always fun to see when you get a guy who's taking a step forward like that. And again, we'll see if Tennessee's defense gets better. In the interim, Michigan's a team, circling back to them as we get Anthony Broome on the line, we hope. He's a guy – Michigan's a team that has a quarterback that has to do the same thing, has to take that step forward. We'll see if they do. That's a nice win, but they have bigger games coming up. And there's Anthony right there. We're going to get a chance to talk to him right now after Michigan's big win. The Wolverines, Anthony Broome joins us on the program. How are you, Anthony? Good to see you, buddy.
I'm great. Another week in the books. Can't believe we're 4 weeks in already. It's flying by. We wait all year for it, and then we're a third of the way through the regular season. It's crazy.
You want to bring us down just like that, Anthony? No, let's revel in the fact that was a fun game. It's a win. Michigan's still undefeated. Uneven play from J.J. McCarthy means we get a lot to talk about here. So let's start there. Get the win over Maryland. It's a big day on the ground for Corum. We'll talk about him in a moment, but let's first talk about the young quarterback, because you see the spectacular play and then you see the, oh my God, why are you still holding the football play?
Yeah, I think a lot of Michigan's offensive quote unquote struggles from yesterday's game were, I think that it's a quarterback that's still learning that, this really was his first real start. I mean, he played against a couple really bad teams in Hawaii and UConn. The dial switch got cranked up a little bit this week when you play a team that at least, if you want to say that Maryland's a middle tier team in the Big Ten, middle to lower tier, that's fine. But it's the first team you see that has comparable athletes. They're well coached, all those types of things. So for me, I think that some of the struggles boiled down to, this is a guy that is learning that you can't just play hero ball. And I think with the play callers too, just kind of still learning what they can put on this young man's shoulders. So a little loose with the football. He didn't record a turnover, but they left a term that Michigan keeps using is we've left meat on the bone on offense. I mean, they were impressive at times. McCarthy had a couple of huge clutch throws late in the game, but they did leave some points and some yards out there. So it's a process for him. I think there are some Michigan fans who think he was, like some of those young quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence, et cetera. They are ready out of the box. This is still a developing guy who's learning to kind of play within himself and just run the offense, as opposed to it all has to boil down to me. So I can't say I was overly concerned by what I saw. I'll say this though, when you look at the stat line, 18 for 26, 220 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's like, for Michigan the last couple of years, that's been like a solid to good Cade McNamara game. And we're talking about J.J. McCarthy like it was a C+, performance. So there is so much upward trajectory there still. I see a guy who the game is slowing down for him. I think he's making smart decisions for the most part. It's just a matter of, snap to snap, just making the right read, making the right play, and just trusting your guys around you.
Always, Anthony, easier to talk about a player who's developing, learning, getting better as you play after a win. Obviously, you get a win, you survive some of the unevenness, you move forward, you learn from your mistakes. Coaches love games like that because they have everything they want all in one. They get the victory, but they're able to sit the young man down and say, now look, we can't have this, or we need to do this. But another big reason for the win was Blake Corum. How big is it to Michigan to have him rise up and have the kind of game that he did? I thought the game changed on the 4th down run, the first one that he broke outside, obviously muddled in the middle there. He gets to the outside and scores, and I thought that wrestled kind of momentum away from Maryland at that point.
Yeah, to address your first point before Corum, I think that this was you never want to say a less than ideal performance is what the doctor ordered, but this is the first game tape where I feel like these Michigan coaches can actually sit down and figure out what needs to be coached, what needs to be improved moving forward. So from that perspective, I totally agree with you there. And you'd rather do it in a win than struggle and lose or things like that. So as far as Blake Corum goes, I mean, we've been pretty transparent about the fact that, this is not, they don't have a Hassan Haskins on this team, or we didn't think they did. A guy that you could give him the ball 25, 30 times a game, week in and week out. He's going to get the job done for you, pick up the tough yards, all those types of things. Last year, Blake Corum was kind of more of the finesse guy. Not always a guy that could run between the tackles, but he bulked up a little bit this offseason, put on about 11 or 12 pounds. And when you watch him play on the field, I won't say he looks a step slower, but the burst just isn't quite the same that we saw. But, he did what he did physically to himself this offseason to be able to shoulder that load a little bit more. I know for Michigan, they want it to be like a 1A and 1B dynamic with him and Donovan Edwards, who didn't play on Saturday, but Blake Corum was kind of their guy, and they gave CJ Stokes, the freshman, a chance to have a carry early on in the game. He fumbles the football away, and it's they just couldn't have that in a tight game like that. So they needed Blake Corum to have a big day. I thought he looked outstanding. The 4th down play absolutely changed the game. He had the touchdown run late in the game that sort of iced things away for Michigan. He has pushed a pile a little bit, and he does. I don't want to see, you never want to see a guy like that because he is a little smaller than most running backs just take a beating and take 30 carries every week. And I don't think when they're healthy, they'll need to do that. But, for one day, they needed him to kind of just be the guy. And he showed out in, I think we've all, Michigan circles have known that he's capable of big things and making big plays. But that was pretty eye-opening. And it was actually kind of alarming to me how casually dominant it was. Usually when a guy runs for 243 yards, you notice that, like, it jumps off the page. But there was a point in the game where I think it was sometime in the first half where he looked down and he had like 13 carries for 127 yards. And we're like, whoa, like how did he get there? Like it was impressive. And also the best day that Michigan's offensive line has had this year so far, from snap one to the end of the game. I was really impressed with how those guys played as well.
Yeah, you get a great performance as well from a backup tight end, and it has a huge day. I believe it was 7 catches. I forgot the total. I watched that game yesterday. It was a fun game to watch, but that's always fun to see when a guy who's put in the time, the work, the investment, and been there a while and have that kind of success.
Absolutely. I mean, Eric All didn't play. We don't know how long he might be sidelined, but they think that Luke Schoonmaker is someone that I just talked about 1A and 1B with the running backs, but they think that they had that dynamic with him and Eric All, and the fact that he was able to just kind of step in and fill the void and really have the best tight end performance we've seen from Michigan so far this year was impressive. 7 catches, 72 yards. I think when you have a young quarterback, to have a safety valve over the middle of the field where, first, second read's not there, or really there was a few throws where Schoonmaker was the guy, was the read, and that ball comes out quick and it's on the money, and that guy helps you move the chains. So really impressed by what I saw to him. And like I said, the tight end usage in the Jim Harbaugh offense has sort of waned a bit as they've modernized their attack here a little bit. I mean, it's always a bread and butter position for them. You're seeing them use those guys more as H-backs and lead blockers now. But, when your number is called, you got to be ready. And I think that whether Eric All is healthy or not, Luke Schoonmaker is a guy that is more than capable, and that's something that he showed on Saturday.
Anthony, thanks, man. I really appreciate you joining us here. The Wolverines, Anthony Broome, we appreciate you, and we'll talk to you again down the line as the season progresses. I won't hurry it. Let's just live in the moment. Let's live in these – we love the game so much. We don't need to talk about how little is left, right? Good to see you, man. Have a great rest of the weekend.
Of course. 1 week at a time. Thank you, guys.
That is the Wolverines, Anthony Broome, and we segue from him, and we now have an opportunity to talk to Bobby Burton, Inside Texas on 3. Damn it, Bobby. I hate that I have to have you on after that, right? Come on, man. And I got to ask you, out of curiosity, I believe it was 18 plays, 75 yards, Texas Tech's first drive. Did you know then that you're thinking this could be a long day? Or did you think, okay, well, we got to get off the field. We'll see what happens. But Texas never got off the field on 3rd and 4th down.
Yeah, rarely got off the field. And thanks for having me.
Sure.
I appreciate it, Jeff. I feel like Texas, you knew it was a long day. Tech scored on the first 2 possessions, touchdowns both times, connected on a 3rd and 26. Texas had an offsides call that then created an opportunity for Tech to just fling it deep. And they got a PI call, several plays later, Tech's in the end zone again for 14 points in the first half when Texas had played well enough probably to get off the field. Texas then played really well in the second quarter, went up 24-14 going into half, 10-point lead, stopped the Red Raiders on a 4th down play to start the second half. But then the Longhorns didn't put their foot on the throat, which has been a MO of the Longhorns over the last several years, really. And Tech came back over time and really just made it into a game of attrition almost. Tech ran 100 plays in this game compared to Texas's just 60. To be fair, Texas is a quick strike offense with Steve Sarkisian. And Tech just dinked and dunked all the way down the field all game long. They were 6 of 8 on 4th down. And they started going early and often. In the very first drive, they went on 4th downs twice. Even on the final drive of the game that put them ahead on a field goal, they actually converted on a 4th down as well until they got to overtime. Texas Tech actually beat Texas 37-34 in overtime in Lubbock.
Yeah, I see the score of the graphic there is wrong, but you're right. And I do. My question to you is, I think it's interesting early in a coaching tenure, a coaching change. We're still early on in Sarkisian's efforts to get Texas back to where they want to be. You always wonder where a team's at mentally, emotionally, physically. We talk about this. You get evidence from week to week that helps you deduce that information. So when you see Texas play Alabama the way they did, that incredible atmosphere, and the defense was dominant against Alabama's run, you think, okay, Texas has better athletes than I thought. Looks like they're further along in their growth and their process to turning it around. But you're never sure. That's one game. Now you see a game like this that, frankly, Texas probably should have won this football game. But again, we talk about not being able to get off the field, the defense getting very tired late. Texas Tech comes back and wins in overtime. You get an uncharacteristic, unfortunate fumble from the best player on the field, Bijan Robinson, all of that stuff. What is Texas? What do you believe Texas to be right now? The Big 12 is wide open, as we saw. Oklahoma lost to Kansas State. That's a week after Kansas State lost to Tulane. So everywhere you look, you see strange results. What do you think the ceiling is for this Texas team, and where are they most lacking in personnel?
Oh, I think that strengths and weaknesses are pretty evident. They have some home run hitters on offense. They lost Xavier Worthy in the second half, and I think that dialed down the offensive game plan from Steve Sarkisian yesterday. But Bijan Robinson is a playmaker at the running back position. Unfortunately, they have a young offensive line. They're starting 2 true freshmen, a sophomore, a junior, and then just 1 senior. And so he's not getting the most out of that. And defenses, while Hudson Card played admirably yesterday, does not present a threat downfield like Quinn Ewers. And so teams are committing 8 people to the box to stop Bijan Robinson. And when Texas can't run the football, Hudson Card is not capable necessarily of shaking people loose down the field and making them pay for it. That also is part of the problem of the Texas wide receiver room. Once Xavier Worthy goes out, they also lost a young man named Isaiah Nayor, a transfer from Wyoming. That would have been really good to have yesterday. But, I feel like the Texas team is definitely improving. The defense is playing better as a whole, but they lack disruptors. They lack people that make game-changing plays. And that was never more evident than yesterday, where on 6 times Texas Tech made a first down on 4th down. And there were only 1 or 2 of those 4th downs that were truly, truly short yardage, 4th and inches, 4th and 1. It wasn't like they were converting 4th and inches several times. They were converting 4th and 4, 4th and 3, 4th and 7, 4th and whatever. I mean, it was a number of different ones. So I feel like Texas is playing better defensively as a whole. They just aren't making big time plays because I think they may lack a big time player on defense at this point. Overall, it's tough. Overall, I think Texas is a 7-5, 8-4 team if they get Quinn Ewers back, and only if they get Quinn Ewers back and Xavier Worthy is healthy. His X-rays on his lower leg came back negative last night. So he should theoretically be ready to go against West Virginia this coming weekend.
Bobby, it's always interesting because when you guys are there covering this team 4-on-3 for Inside Texas, you guys get an opportunity to see the good, the bad, and everything in between. And you certainly are always aware of the other side. But after a game like the Alabama game, are you sitting back thinking maybe they're further along? Or did you know that, man, that they may have caught lightning in a bottle there in that moment? That atmosphere was incredible. And you're right, losing the quarterback hurts immensely. How soon till Ewers comes back?
They're thinking either next week or for Oklahoma week, which is 2 weeks from now. He was actually in Lubbock, traveled to Lubbock, warmed up, but Sark announced prior to the game that it was going to be Hudson Card, and we didn't expect necessarily to see Quinn Ewers this week. But, now Texas is 0-1 in the Big 12, staring a 2-2 record in the face. They were hopeful they would be 3-1 sitting here. But I tell you what, the Longhorn fans saw too much deja vu yesterday. They saw too much of what they saw a year ago, giving up a double-digit lead in the second half. An offense sputtered and a defense wore down. Now, it took a superhuman effort from Donovan Smith and a lot of gamble from Joey McGuire, the new Texas Tech coach, to pull that off, much more so than it did a year ago when Texas flailed. But still, too much deja vu. Texas has some work ahead of it.
Bobby, thank you so much for your insight. I look forward to talking to you down the line. Be well, good sir. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Jeff, good show here, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Appreciate you. This is a little taste of what we do every Sunday. It's a pretty rapid look around college football. We'll usually have 3 to 4 guests on the program each week. Take a look at that top 25, sometimes outside the top 25. We bring on the experts from On3, bring in the experts from On3 onto the program, the College Football Wrap, because it's a lot of fun to do to get where a team's at. Obviously, when you're there on a daily basis, you see some of the warts, also some of the younger players that are improving with each practice, each week of practice, and each game week. So teams change over the course of a season. We think so often that we really know what a team is after a big moment in the year. But I think we've seen so far in this young college football season that you really can't hang your hat on too much. Sure, Georgia's really good. Hang your hat on that. But they didn't play well this past weekend. It happens. Kids are subject to the whims of emotion. Alabama's a team that obviously quietly dispatched Vanderbilt 55-3, but we're still going to have our questions about them because of the performance against aforementioned Texas from just a couple of weeks ago. We watch as Texas A&M, who we wrote off, and the offense continues to struggle, come back and get 2 big wins, one against Miami and then one in Jerry's World this past weekend against Arkansas. We were told Clemson's defense might be the best defense in the country. Well, yesterday, Sam Hartman threw 6 touchdown passes against the supposed best defense in the country. That secondary absolutely got lit up. Interesting to note there. Southern Cal's offense hasn't been stopped yet this year. So you maybe didn't pay close attention when you saw the schedule come out this week that USC was taking on Oregon State. Ho-hum, too many athletes for USC. That game won't be that close, right? 17-14 late touchdown wins for Southern Cal. That game could have spelled the end towards a playoff push for Southern Cal. I know fans there believe they're good enough to win the Pac-12. We'll see. Question marks about the defense coming into the season, but yesterday it was the offense that struggled. And then there was Oklahoma, who we just got done talking about. looking so good on offense. The Brent Venables era just getting started. We would assume that defense is going to be ratcheted up and fixed. All those years with Lincoln Riley, Oklahoma could score a ton. They didn't stop a ton of people, so you figure Brent Venables gets in there. Look at the way this team is playing defense. Oh, but wait a minute. Adrian Martinez is going to do something insane in a game in Norman, Kansas State, who just lost to Tulane and scored 10 points while doing it, goes into Norman and beats Oklahoma. College football is nuts. Miami got housed at home by Middle Tennessee State. This game is tremendous. Every Sunday, we talk about it right here on the College Football Wrap. It's my great pleasure to do so, to host it and to talk to these great people at On3. If you haven't signed up to your team respective site on On3, do so today. Most of the On3 sites around the country have some sort of special currently going on where you'll get all of this great content and inside information for relatively cheap for the year. I can tell you that. Some places it's $1, some places it's $10, but either way, you really can't beat it. So make sure you do it. I want to thank Trey Yannity. I want to thank Chris Doherty as well, as they helped produce the show today. I want to thank our guests as well. It was a pleasure having Anthony Broome from the Wolverine on, obviously, and Austin Price of VolQuest. They're excited down there in Tennessee. And Bobby Burton inside Texas, good enough to join us after a tough loss there. Until next time, enjoy the college football, enjoy the NFL today. If you want, I'll talk to you next Sunday at 11 o'clock. Like and subscribe to the College Football Wrap. That way you know when we're on next Sunday, 11 a.m. Take care, everybody.